today is going to be a walkthrough of the Bulletproof Notion Template 2.0, which is a template that is developed by Notion VIP. So it's going to be available in the description below as a paid template option, but there is a discount code that we're offering you folks, $50 off the actual template. So that's $50 off using the code KEEPPRODUCTIVE. I just wanted to pass over to Will to do a short explainer of it. This is a perfect template for freelancers, entrepreneurs, and even those who are getting really nerdy inside of Notion and are looking for a more formalized process to managing and coordinating their projects and their tasks. So folks, a big thank you to Will for coming on and explaining this, but please do check out the link in the description. Cheers folks, and over to Will.
Thanks so much, Francesco. Indeed, I am William Nutt of Nutt Labs, and we're an integrated digital strategy firm and Notion consultancy based in New York. And I also run the independent website Notion VIP, where I publish tools and insights about all things Notion. You can access that at notion.vip. And I'm pleased to join you today for a walkthrough of my refreshed bulletproof methodology for Notion users. If you hit any roadblocks as you implement these strategies on your own, please feel free to tweet at me at William Nutt, or you can reply to the Notion VIP newsletter. The Bulletproof Workspace draws from the most widely used productivity methodologies to offer a powerful, universal framework for Notion. It adopts the most applicable features of the PARA method, getting things done, OKRs, and pillars, pipelines, vaults. Version 1 informed thousands of workspaces in the work of leading Notion consultants, and now version 2 incorporates the latest features of Notion and a variety of novel strategies from my own experience and other vanguards of the Notion community. But it retains the same core principles that made it so uniquely powerful from the beginning. You can implement it from scratch using this video and the Notion VIP post as guides, or you can download the fully developed template linked within the post and video description. So before we dive in, let's consider the features that create a highly effective Notion workspace. An effective workspace is structured enough to keep information accurate and consistent, yet flexible enough to accommodate evolving content, new users, and changes to Notion itself. It upholds core principles of design and leverages Notion's advanced functionalities to create an intuitive, joyful experience for all users. These are among the many needs served by the Bulletproof methodology, and at its core lies my foremost recommendation for any Notion workspace, and that is to centralize information within related master databases and then create filtered views of that information within contextual dashboards. So Bulletproof 2.0 organizes those master databases in a top-level page called Vault, which you may recognize from August Bradley's Pillars, Pipelines, Vault system. And within the Vault are 3 subpages: Buckets, Bolts, and Bytes. So Buckets is actually a database in itself. Its items are the high-level categories of your life or work. If you're familiar with the PARA method, buckets are like areas. So at work, buckets might include marketing, accounting, and product development. In a personal workspace, you might have finances, fitness, and travel. As you'll see, by connecting your buckets to other databases using the relation property, each bucket can serve as a dashboard that displays its related projects, resources, events, and other information. And then Bolts is a page that contains databases, and those databases demonstrate and measure progress. They're continuously expanding as you conduct your work. So going back to PARA, the Bolts page contains the projects database along with the master tasks database. The Bytes page contains databases with information for reference. Most notably, it includes the Master Resources database, which is where you want to store your information by default unless it absolutely requires an independent database of its own. Common exceptions to that are Master Brands and Contacts databases. And then an e-commerce company might also have a database of products, while a chef might have a database of ingredients that could be linked to a database of recipes. So buckets and resources are really the only essential databases. And then within Bolts and Bytes, you can store the other databases that best suit your needs. So I'm going to walk through the ones that are most widely applicable and included within the Bulletproof 2.0 template. Within Bolts, that's going to include those projects and tasks databases, along with meetings and events, objectives and key results for managing OKRs, and a quarters database for managing information by quarter. Within Bytes, we'll have that primary resources database, as well as a brands and contacts database. And then after the master databases, we'll look at common dashboards. Each bucket is a dashboard, as I mentioned, and individual projects serve as dashboards as well. We'll also see a high-level home page for your full team and a personalized dashboard for individual team members. So let's dive into the databases. As I said, the buckets database is a direct descendant of the Vault page, while Bolts and Bytes are pages that contain other databases. So here we can see in this demonstration workspace for Loggerhead Labs that we have just a few high-level pages. Among those pages is the Vault page, and if we toggle that open, we can see buckets, bolts, and bytes. So if we click to view the Vault page, we can see those buckets, bolts, and bytes arranged nicely within a column. So buckets, like I said, is a database in itself, and its items are the high-level categories of your life or work. So if we open up buckets, we can see that it is a database, and its default view is a gallery where the cards display just the name of the bucket along with its icon, no other properties, and no card preview. So buckets can be your internal operations at work, such as business development and marketing and branding. And depending on the nature of your work, your clients might constitute buckets as well. So this database is going to allow you to categorize your buckets as either internal or clients. And this gallery displays the clients first and then the internal buckets. And within each category, it alphabetizes them. So this default gallery view displays your buckets in a really aesthetic way that are easy to view and open, but the table view makes the buckets really easy to edit it. So here you can see all of the buckets properties. So the title property has been named bucket. And then there's that category property that's a select property where you have the option of client or internal. And then we have the person property to indicate the team that's working within the bucket. And what this person property allows you to do is each individual team member within their personalized dashboard can filter the bucket's dashboard to display only those they're working on. And then we have two checkbox properties. The first is to indicate if a bucket is frequently accessed. So on the home page dashboard for the full team, we can display only the buckets that are frequently accessed by filtering for this property. And then when we're no longer actively working on a bucket, we can check it as archived and exclude it from all filtered views of the buckets database. So in addition to these properties, we have some relations. Because buckets serve as sort of the high-level categories of your life or work, it's related to a variety of other databases, including the brands database, the meetings and events database, the projects database, the objectives database, and the resources database, all of which we'll be reviewing here momentarily. And then we also have a roll-up property to pull in the contacts. And what this does is each brand is going to be tied to one or more contacts, as you'll see. And so what this roll-up property does is it pulls in all of the contacts that are related to the brands that are related to this buckets database. So if we open up one of these buckets, as I said, these buckets serve as sort of their own little dashboards. If we open up the Blue Ribbon Restaurants bucket, we can see all of those properties that we just reviewed. And then the internal contents of this page comprises a collection of linked databases where only the items that are related to this bucket are displayed. So for the projects database, we can see a gallery of the active and ongoing projects that are related to this bucket. And the gallery cards display the name of the project, the status of the project, and then this nice visual progress bar. Now, ongoing projects won't have progress to be measured, so there's no progress bar displayed. So this default view displays active and ongoing projects, and then we have a board to display all projects. And this board is going to group the projects by their status. And of course, we're only viewing the projects that fall within this particular bucket. So then we have a view of the resources that are related directly to this bucket, and this also is a gallery with no card preview, and it only displays the name of the resource, and it's sorted alphabetically. And then we have a view of the meetings and events database for the meetings and events that are associated with this bucket. The default view is a list of the meetings and events that fall within the current month. That is within the past month and within the upcoming month. We also have a calendar view. Now, I honestly don't care much for this calendar view because it basically eliminates the title when it's displayed in this condensed way with the time of the event. But because we're talking about meetings and events here, I kind of thought we had to include the calendar view. And if you're on a much larger screen most of the day, then this calendar view might work well for you. So then we have a view of the objectives database. Now, because this Blue Ribbons restaurant example is a client, it's not typically going to have objectives that are scheduled for it specifically. But if we go back to the buckets database and choose one of the internal ones, like marketing and branding, we can scroll down and see that this has objectives populated, and each objective will have the name of the objective, the quarter that it's scheduled for, and then another one of those nice visual progress bars. And the default view is going to show the objectives that fall within the current quarter, but we also have an all view that's still a gallery, but it's going to display all of the objectives associated with this bucket, not just in the current quarter. So rather than adding all of these linked databases each time we create a new bucket, we have a template. So when we create a new bucket, we can just click on this arrow here, choose bucket, and it's going to automatically create a new bucket where all of those linked databases are filtered for the new bucket automatically. If we click on edit here, we can see that all of that information is blank. This is a self-referencing filter that will automatically apply the new bucket to each of these linked databases. So that's the buckets database. And remember, the buckets database is a direct descendant of the vault, while bolts and bytes are pages that contain databases. And the bolts page is going to contain databases that demonstrate and measure progress. They're continuously expanding as you conduct your work. So let's click into bolts and jump into the projects database. So projects are going to be initiatives that are completed through a series of tasks. And that makes projects parents of tasks. The databases are related through relation properties, and most tasks are linked to a project. That allows you to display a project's tasks within its inner page, and it also allows you to calculate the progress of the project as a percentage of the completed tasks. So this default view of the projects database is going to be another gallery that displays active and upcoming projects. And each card is going to have no card preview, and it's going to display the name of the project, the associated bucket, and then for active projects, it'll have one of those nice visual progress bars. We also have a table view of all projects, and this makes them easy to edit sort of in bulk, and it also shows us all of their associated properties. So the title property for projects has been named project, and then we have a relation property to relate each project to a bucket from the buckets database that we just reviewed. And then we have a select property to indicate the status of the project, and we can see that we have active, ongoing, planned, and complete as the 4 options. A date property allows us to specify the time frame of the project with a start date and an end date. And then here's another person property to indicate the project manager, along with another person property for the team. And again, this is going to allow each associated member to include their specific projects on their personalized dashboards. And then here's that nice visual progress bar. So you can see that this progress bar is a formula property, and it is referencing a roll-up property that we'll look at here in just a second. Let's open up a project to do that. So when we open up project A, we can see all of those properties that we just reviewed, along with a few additional relation properties. So projects, in addition to their relation to their tasks, are also related to resources, as well as meetings and events, and of course their bucket as well. So here we have a progress percentage property. It's a roll-up property, and what this does is it pulls in the percentage of completed tasks for this project. So you can see here, if we look at the configuration, we've chosen the tasks relation, which is this tasks property here with all of these related tasks. And for each of these tasks, we want to pull in the complete property, which is a checkbox property. And because it's a checkbox property, we can automatically calculate the percentage of checked checkboxes, which is an indication of the percentage of completed tasks. So that's what gives us our 77.8% here. And then this formula property takes this 77.8% and formats it as this nice visual progress bar. Now, I won't get into the details of how this is done. There's actually another post on Notion VIP and another video, but it's already pre-configured within the Bulletproof 2.0 template. And if you want to learn how it works, you can take a look at those other resources. But it is just kind of this complex formula here that takes this percentage and formats it this way, which displays really nicely within gallery cards. So if we scroll down into the inner page contents of this project, we can see some useful information. We have a space for links, and so this is intended to include, you can include link to page blocks, or you can include web bookmarks to external information that you might want to reference as you complete this project. And then we have a linked database that's linking to the resources database. So this is going to display as a gallery all of the resources that are related to this project. And it displays just their title that makes them easy to identify and click as needed. And then most importantly, we have a linked database for our tasks associated with this project. Now, the default view is going to be a list that sorts the tasks by their due date. And it's also going to include the person that the task is assigned to, along with that complete property, that checkbox property that's used to calculate the progress of the project. So we also have a table view of tasks, which makes them a little bit easier to edit. So scrolling down further, we have a section for notes. So as you take notes within your project, it's nice to keep them organized within toggles. So there's a placeholder for the first sort of toggle category. And then lastly, we have a linked database for the meetings and events that are associated with this particular project. And the default view is a list, and it shows all of the meetings and events that occur within the previous month or the upcoming month. And then we also have another one of those calendar views because we're working with meetings and events. So just as we saw in the buckets database, the projects database also includes a template for populating all of this helpful information automatically when you create a new project. So within this little arrow next to the new button, we can see that we have a project template, and when you click that project template, it'll automatically include all of that helpful information for your new project. So that's the projects database. Let's take a look at their tasks. So because tasks are typically viewed within their projects and on personalized dashboards, you really don't need to worry about the view of the original task database. So we just have a standard table here that makes tasks easy to edit in bulk, and you can see all of their associated properties. So the title property is going to be called task, and then we have a person property to indicate the person responsible for completing the task. And again, this is going to allow those individuals to include their assigned tasks within their personalized dashboards. And then a date property shows when the date needs to complete it. It's due date. But we have another date property to show the due date, the DO date. And this is a strategy I love from my friend August Bradley. So whereas the project manager can indicate when the task absolutely must be completed, the person responsible for completing the task can indicate when they plan to complete it and then sort by that DO date that makes their task management easy. So then we have a checkbox property to indicate when the task has been completed. And again, this is going to inform the progress of the parent project. And then for that project, we have a relation property to tie each task to a project. So we also can relate tasks to individual meetings and events where we can display tasks that are assigned during meetings and events. And then we have a roll-up property that automatically populates the bucket for each task. And it's going to do this by pulling in the bucket for each associated project. So let's move on to objectives. Now, you're likely familiar with the OKR system of managing goals. It was born out of Intel and then popularized in the 90s by Google. And there's a post on Notion VIP with more detail, but basically each OKR comprises an objective and multiple key results. And therefore, we have a master objectives database and then a key results database. And they're related through relation properties. And just as projects are parents of tasks, objectives are parents of key results. So objectives are ambitious goals, typically with an achievement rate around 70%, and they're typically set quarterly. So this objectives database is also related to the quarters database, which allows you to view filtered objectives within each quarter. So this default view of the objectives database is going to be a gallery that displays all of the objectives within the current quarter. So it's going to show the name of the objective, a nice visual progress bar, and then it also includes this related quarter. And another view displays all objectives in the same format and arranged chronologically. So if we open up one of these objectives, we can see all of its properties. So we have this relation property to relate it to a quarter. We can relate each objective to a bucket. We have a team property that allows team members to display their related objectives within their personalized dashboards. And then we have that formula for the progress bar once again. And I'll talk in a moment about how that is calculated for objectives. But we have a time frame that's pulled in through a roll-up property. And what this does is it takes the time frame of the associated quarter and populates it here. And that is what allows us to sort objectives chronologically. And then we have another roll-up property that pulls in the current checkbox for the associated quarter as well, so that we can display only the current objectives. And that's a much quicker method of filtering than configuring a filter for a date that falls within the time frame. So then, of course, we have the related key results for this objective as well. These would be the children of this objective. So the way that the progress percentage property, this roll-up property, is going to create its calculation is based on the progress of the individual key results. So as you'll see in the key results database, we have a formula that calculates a percentage based on the progress of the individual key result. And what this roll-up property does to calculate its percentage is it averages the associated key results. So you can see here that when we go into our configuration, we choose the key results as the relation, which is this relation property. And for that related database, we want to choose its progress property, which we'll look at. And in this case, we want to average all of the progress properties for the associated key results, which gives us an overall progress of the objective. So the default view of this linked database, the linked key results database, is a list of the associated key results, and it includes just the name of the key result and then its respective progress. Now we also have a table that makes the key results easy to manage within each objective. So let's look at that key results database. We'll go back to our bolts page and choose key results. So key results are measurable steps towards achieving an objective. And each objective typically has 2 to 5 key results. And just as tasks are typically viewed within their projects, key results are almost always viewed within their objective, as we just saw. So the view within the original database is really unimportant, but what matters is these properties. So the title property is just named key result. And then we have 3 number properties. We have the starting value, current value, and target value. And remember, the real purpose of a key result is just to demonstrate measurable progress towards its objective. It serves as a metric for the objective's overall progress. So when you would create a key result, you would indicate where you are now with that metric, where you want to be with that metric, which would be the target value. And then as you make progress, you'll be updating the current value. And what this formula property does, the progress property, is calculate your progress towards your target value. And so remember, your overall objective progress is going to be an average of all of the individual progresses of the associated key results. So that's simply the key results database. Typically, you'll manage your key results within their objectives. So let's look next at quarters, since we're talking about OKRs. Now, having this quarters database is going to allow you to view your information by quarter. Within the Bulletproof 2.0 workspace, that includes just objectives, but you can really use quarters to organize any of your information, and not just quarters. You could also have a database of years, months, and even days to view your information in really helpful ways. So this default view of the quarters database is a gallery, and it displays the name of the quarter along with its time frame, and that time frame is going to serve as the method of sorting. So we also have a table view here that makes it easy to edit quarters and also see their simple properties. So the title property is just called quarter. Then we have a time frame with a start date and an end date. And then we have a formula property that automatically determines if the current date falls within the time frame of the quarter. And that allows for sorting and filtering, particularly filtering for the current quarter. And remember, in the objectives database, we used roll-up properties to pull in the time frame and to pull in the current property so that we could sort and filter the objectives in the same way without having to recreate these time frame and current properties. So this quarters database is linked only to the objectives database, but if you were to be managing other information by quarter, you could relate it to this database and then display linked views within the quarters pages. So if we open up this quarters page, we can see a linked view of the objectives database, and it's going to display it as a gallery along with its visual progress bar and associated bucket. And of course, this linked database is filtered only for this quarter. And if we are to open any objective, just as we can from any view of the objectives database, we can see that its key results are offered within this list. And so we have a template for adding a new quarter that's automatically going to include that list of objectives for the quarter. So our last database within Bolts is going to be our meetings and events database. And the default view of the meetings and events database is a list, and it's sorted by the when property, which we'll see in a second, but when the event occurs, and it includes the name of the event, it includes that when property, and also the associated bucket. So we also have a calendar view, which you clearly know by now I don't care much for, but if you're on a big screen, it could be helpful, and it is nice to see events arranged in a calendar if you can read their title. And then we have our table view that makes all of the events easy to edit and also see their properties. So we can see that the title property is named event. We have that when property, which is a date property, and in some cases you may want to specify just the date. Most often you'll probably want to include a time, and in some cases you can include a date range, such as the sample industry conference here. Then we have a text property to describe where it is. It could be a physical location, or for a virtual conference it might be a URL. Then you can include attendees as well, and as we see with all of our person properties, this allows those individuals to include their associated meetings and events within their personal dashboards. Then we have a relation property to indicate the bucket that the event falls within. And then we can also relate each event to a project. So when we open up those projects as their own little dashboards, we can see a list of the events associated with it. Now, if we open up any of the events, you can see that it contains some helpful information for conducting your meetings. So you have an opportunity to construct an agenda in advance of the meeting. If you want to include any external information, you can include link to page blocks or web bookmarks within the references section. And then during the meeting, you can take notes, and you may or may not want to use toggles within that notes section, and you can assign action items as well. So this is a template, and it's called a simple meeting. But we also have a template for formal meetings. So if we look at the way that that is constructed, it's going to include a little bit more detail. So in advance of the meeting, you can define the purpose of the meeting and any objectives that you want to accomplish. Again, you can include references, link to page blocks or web bookmarks. And then for the agenda, it's actually an internal table, and you can define the topic, you can assign a leader, and then you can also assign a duration of each topic to make sure that you're staying on schedule. And then once again, you have a notes section. And then for the action items, you have a linked view of the tasks database where you can actually create new tasks during the meeting. And that is why we have our tasks database related to this meeting and events database, so that we can actually create tasks that are associated with each meeting or event, and this is going to add them directly to the actual tasks database that each team member will be able to include within their personal home pages. So within this view here, we have that responsible property that's included with all tasks so that individuals can filter their tasks associated not only with projects, but also with meetings and events within their personalized home pages. So let's move on to the Bytes page. And remember, the Bytes page contains databases with information for reference, the most important of which is the resources database. And unless you have an obvious need for an additional master database, all of your referential information should live within your resources database. So that includes standard operating procedures and guides of various types, and training materials and onboarding procedures, and legal, HR, and financial documents. But when you have a collection of items with shared properties, it may warrant its own master database within the Bytes page, especially if it would be helpful to display views of that database within buckets, projects, and other databases. So as I mentioned, brands and contacts are common examples that we'll review in just a moment. But again, a chef might have an ingredients database that's related to a recipes database, or an e-commerce store could have a database of its products. So let's jump into that resources database. And you can see that the default view here is going to be a board of resources grouped by their category. So as I mentioned, your resources database is very likely to include standard operating procedures, guides, training, and onboarding materials, and so forth. So by categorizing them that way, you can display them in this nice board view, and the cards display just the name of the resource along with the bucket that resource is related to. So we also have a table view that makes these resources easy to edit in bulk and to see all of their properties. So the title property is going to be named resource, and then we have the relation property to assign a bucket to it. And of course, within that bucket inner page view, we have a list of the related resources. So this is a place where you can establish that relation. And then in order to achieve that category board, we have this select property for the category. And you can see that we have a handful of options here, which of course you can customize on your own. Sometimes it's helpful to include a description with each resource. And then this person property, the users of the resource, is going to allow those individuals to display the resources within their personalized dashboards. Now, oftentimes you may want to attach a file to your resource, and here's a place where you can do that within this files and media property. And then just like we did with buckets, we have frequent and archive checkboxes. So frequent will allow you to choose which resources to display on your home page, and then archive will allow you to exclude resources within filtered views. And then resources can also be related to projects so that you can display the related resources within the inner pages of those projects. So that's typically the way that you'll view these resources, is within the buckets and within the projects and within the dashboards. So you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time on these views here, but if you do find yourself accessing the database directly, you might also consider creating additional views by specific categories. So that is the resources database, and that could actually be a full topic on its own, how you actually utilize this to centralize all of your resources of various types. But the more you can consolidate it, the more intuitive and sustainable your workspace is going to be. So let's go back to our Bytes page and move on to brands. So the brands database centralizes companies, nonprofits, and organizations of all kinds. And depending on the nature of your work, that may include customers, partners, vendors, and manufacturers. And brands can be linked to individual contacts, products, and other types of content, which is going to allow you to filter and view that content in helpful ways by brand. And when your clients serve as buckets, as we saw in this Loggerhead Labs example, you can link their bucket to their brand, which allows you to roll up its contacts. as we saw within the buckets database. So this default view of the brands database is going to display this nice gallery that sorts the brands alphabetically, and each card shows the name of the brand along with its website, which you can easily click. So we also have a sales pipeline, and this allows you to use the brands database as your sales CRM. Now, a conventional CRM may have an independent database for deals or opportunities, but in my experience, I find that it works perfectly well to use the brands database as your sales CRM, and that further consolidates your information for simplicity and sustainability. So you can see here that all of these brands are grouped by where they fall in the sales pipeline, which stage they're in, and you can easily drag brands from one stage to the next. So if we open up one of these brands, we'll be able to see its associated properties. So each brand can have one or more categories. So you can see here that we have clients, partners, vendors, and then we have prospects. So a prospect is going to be part of the sales pipeline. So a prospect not only will be labeled as a prospect, but it will also be assigned a stage in the sales pipeline within this other select property. And that's where it will display within the sales pipeline that you're using as a sales CRM. So of course, each brand is going to have a website. You can enter the brand's address. You can assign the brand a bucket. So when you have an established client that also serves as a bucket, here's where you can create that link. And what that's going to allow you to do is pull in the brand's contacts into that bucket, like we saw. And then this brands database is also related to the contacts database, which we'll look at next. And so that's where for each contact, rather than entering their company from scratch within a text field, you can choose from the brand's database. And then with these series of relations, that's how the buckets are able to pull in the contacts for consistency and accuracy. So that's brands. And our very last database here is the contacts database. So of course, contacts are going to represent individual people. And this default view is a gallery that sorts all contacts by their last name, and it displays the brand that they're related to, their email address, and their mobile phone number. So this gallery view is nice to look at and easy to click on for additional information about each contact. But this table view is easy to edit in bulk and also to view the various properties of the contacts. So the title property we call the full name, and then we have additional properties for the first name and last name because it can be helpful to have those separated when you're creating mail merges and other tools where you want to personalize messaging. And then of course we can relate each contact to a brand, which will typically be the contact's employer. We have the email address, the mobile number, the address here, the physical mailing address if you want to enter that, a birth date, and you can also use Notion's reminder feature if you want for each birth date so that you can pass along gifts and best wishes to your contacts. You can include the LinkedIn profile and the headshot. So the headshot's going to be especially useful because you can then create galleries that utilizes the headshot. So we have in this last view here, Team Loggerhead, a gallery that as a card preview uses the headshot as the image of the card preview so that it creates this nice visual gallery, which you can do easily for internal teams, but you might also be able to do it for partners and contractors that you work with closely. It creates a little bit more of a personal experience. So with that is our last database. We are able to move on to the contextual dashboards, which is typically how you're going to be viewing all of the information that you store within the vault. So we looked at buckets, and their internal page contents really serve as a form of contextual dashboards with all of those linked databases within that. And the projects did as well. We were able to see all of the related information for each project within its inner page contents. So we're going to look at two additional contextual dashboards. The first of which is kind of the organization home page, which we have here for Loggerhead Labs. So what you can see on this home page is we've got link to page blocks that link to the databases stored within the vault. So if we click on buckets, for example, you can see that it takes us directly to the buckets database. And the same is going to go for contacts or any of these others that we click on. And because this was the last view that we viewed, we see our Team Loggerhead view, but typically the default view is going to be the top one, which is the gallery. So this nice list of links to the databases makes them easily accessible. And then we can move down the page here. We can see a series of linked databases. So the first one is for our buckets, and we have two different views of our buckets. They're both lists, and the first one shows the clients that serve as buckets, and the second one is going to show the internal buckets. So you can, of course, click on any of these buckets to open up its sort of dashboard view. So the marketing and branding, for example, we can click on and see all of that helpful filtered information associated with it. So that is the buckets view within the home page. We then have the resources, which is a gallery. And you'll recall that property within the resources database, the frequent checkbox, this is where that comes in handy because this linked database is filtered to show only those that are frequently viewed, as indicated by which ones are checked as frequent. And then we have our projects database. And what this one displays is all of the active and ongoing projects. So you can see that it also displays the bucket for each individual project, as well as the progress for those that are not ongoing, because ongoing projects do not have a progress to display. And obviously, this is a nice gallery view here. So, and then, of course, you can click on any of them to open them and view them as that sort of project dashboard with all of the filtered information. So back at our home page, we have our meetings and events database, and this is going to display all of the meetings and events that are within 2 weeks. Those that have occurred within the last week, and then those that are occurring within 1 week from now as well. This displays nicely as a list with the bucket visible, as well as the when property that will typically include a date and time. So that's the kind of high-level organization homepage dashboard. The last dashboard we're going to look at is the personalized dashboard, and this is where each team member can create their own dashboard that displays their related information, and that's why we saw all of those person properties throughout our various master databases. So the first linked database here is going to be the tasks database. So this is going to show all of the tasks that are assigned to this particular person. And what all of these databases on this page do is they utilize the me filter. So whoever signed in is going to be the person who it's filtered for. So the tasks are really easy to manage within the table view. So that's the format that we choose for this one. And each task is going to display its bucket, its due date, its conventional due date, but it also has that DO date that we adopted from August Bradley. And this is where the actual assignee can create a due date for their planning purposes. And then when they complete the task, they can check it off. And this view is actually going to filter out any completed tasks. and only display those that have not yet been completed. So of course, the individual can completely customize these views and create additional views to their liking. But this is the common configuration that comes with the template by default. So we then have a view of the projects database, and this looks just like the other galleries of projects we've seen in various places, but this is filtered to show those that include this particular person within either the project manager property or the team property. And it's also going to be filtered to show only those that are active and ongoing. And then lastly, we have the meetings and events, where this person is within the attendees property, which is a person property. It's going to show all the meetings and events that have occurred within the last month and within the upcoming month. And it displays them within a list here, along with the associated bucket and then the win property as well. So this page can be duplicated for any individual team member, and then they have the ability to customize it however they like. And the final piece of the Bulletproof Workspace 2.0 is the inbox. Now, each member of your workspace will have their own independent inbox page stored privately, and it serves as sort of a bullet journal where throughout each day they can record notes and thoughts and items to remember and to-dos that emerge. And then at the end of each day, they can distribute that information to its proper places. So with that, we have taken a full tour of the Bulletproof Workspace 2.0. I thank you so much for using it to inspire your own workspaces. As I said, you can use this video and the Postal Notion VIP to guide your construction from scratch, or you can grab the template in the link within the video description, also linked within that Notion VIP post. And I very much look forward to seeing what you do with it.